All right, well, welcome and thank you for being here. Um, for those of you that don't know me, my name is David Marshall and I'm the director of the University Honors Program. And I'm excited that we are beginning our second full cycle of junior level interdisciplinary experience courses. We run a 3-year cycle in which we solicit proposals from faculty pairs, and we'll talk about what that looks like momentarily. And then our faculty pairs teach their courses, if selected, 2 to 3 times in that 3-year window. So today the goal is to kind of provide something of an overview about the program and to provide some tips for putting together a proposal. And so you can see here, we'll talk a little bit about the goals of the Interdisciplinary Experience Program. We'll talk about the format, and we'll also talk about those tips for putting together a proposal. Now, the first thing to be aware of is that the goals of this program are not solely focused on students. The goals are also built around a faculty experience. And part of the mandate of the University Honors Program is to provide a vibrant space for faculty to collaborate and to come together. And this is one way that we try to do that. And so we'll talk a little bit about what these goals are, and we'll start with faculty. So first, the Junior Level Interdisciplinary Experience, or JIE, tries to offer a space for teaching that allows faculty to fully leverage their research interests. Now, while we're all given space to do that within our home departments, a lot of times the courses that we teach draw on our expertise, though maybe not our research interests. And so we're sort of giving faculty free rein here to build the courses that they want to build. And it can be specifically around their research interests. It can branch out into other areas as well, but we want this to be a space where teaching and research can really come together. Because we know that faculty benefit from those kinds of opportunities. Now, we also want to create opportunities for colleagues to come together and collaborate around shared research interests. And we'll talk a little bit about what that's looked like in some of our past courses. But it's a recognition that we have faculty across the campus that are working in similar areas on research, and they might be able to bring those kind of unique perspectives to a topic together in a collaborative fashion in order to develop a kind of complex understanding of a research area and to introduce students to that. Next, we also provide professional development that helps faculty become trained in collaborative teaching, team teaching, interdisciplinary teaching, what else? Project and problem-based learning. And these lessons can be taken back into home departments and incorporated there. So what we're trying to do is give faculty a chance to learn some new things that can inform teaching within their majors or even their general education courses. And finally, ultimately, we're really looking at trying to find ways to strengthen a kind of community of scholar teachers, faculty who are interested in trying to bring together research interests with their teaching. And we're all looking for ways to do that. And what we hope to do is bring together people that can talk about how they go about doing that. Now, the goals for students are multiple as well. For students, we're really, on one hand, trying to help students kind of deepen their awareness or develop an awareness of big issues, questions, and problems that are facing all of us in the world today. And while that may seem like it would privilege sort of current events oriented courses, not necessarily. We've had folks working in classical history thinking about the role of political violence and the way that can frame an understanding of political violence in our own day and age with things like the January 6th uprising. So there's a lot of ways of interpreting this. Next, we want to train students to employ particular disciplinary approaches to addressing topics? Can we make them aware of the kind of intellectual moves different disciplines make in order to dive into and understand something better? And then on top of that, we want to put them in a space where they can bring different disciplines together and to try to think about the way that the different methodologies that are being used in disciplines can be brought together in order to address complex problems, issues, questions. And ultimately then, where that brings them in the course experience is to a place of being empowered to develop complex collaborative projects that employ those methodologies and enable them to work together to deepen their own understandings and to apply what they've learned. So those are the goals that we have for students in this program. Now, the format of JIE is built around a two-class structure. When the honors program went through our Q2S transformation process, we were trying to find a way that we could employ an interdisciplinary strategy that brought disciplines from across the campus together, and that would also allow students to satisfy 2 of the 3 upper division GE requirements. And so what we did is created this ultimately 6-unit experience for students that is divided over 2 courses that are team taught. Now, the format breaks down into a 3000 and a 3050 pairing. And when the Q2S transformation team originally conceptualized this curriculum, we imagined it as providing kind of one course as a space for seminar-based learning, kind of deep exploration of a topic, a problem, an issue from different disciplinary perspectives. This might be a space that's leveraging readings or analysis of data or even laboratory techniques, kind of whatever the disciplines involved, whatever the topic involved might allow for. And then the 50 sections we imagined as a kind of collaborative project-oriented space in which students were working together to create projects, to execute projects that applied the learning that was happening in those seminar-based courses. Now, ultimately, this was just our original vision, and faculty pairs that put proposals in aren't committed to this structure. While we do want to encourage collaborative project-oriented learning, it doesn't have to be broken down into these 2 courses. Ultimately, the faculty that are teaching these courses have the latitude to imagine the 2 courses how they see fit. Now, one of the things that we do want to encourage, however, is that both faculty are in the classroom for both of these classes. We see that as an important opportunity for students to learn by observing a modeling of exchange of scholars, of writers, creators from different disciplinary perspectives. And by seeing that modeling, by seeing an exchange between faculty, our students can then begin to understand what that kind of discourse would look like, and then utilize it in their own collaborative projects or in any sort of application of learning. And that's why we buy out each faculty member from 2 courses in the semester that the course is taught, in order to acknowledge that faculty are in the classroom for both of these 2 classes. Now, the course pairings themselves break down this way. We have 3100 and 3150, and you'll notice that the catalog descriptions here are virtually identical, except for the way that they combine kind of broad disciplinary areas, right? So 3100, 3150 bring together natural sciences, physical sciences, life sciences with the humanities. In projects, in courses that examine the intersection of kind of humanities and the sciences. 3200, 3250 sticks with natural sciences, physical sciences, life sciences, but brings that together with social sciences and looks at topics that can unite those two fields. And then 3300 and 3350 bring together the social scientific topics with the humanities, so that each one of these course pairings brings together a unique combination of two of the three upper division GE areas. Now, in doing this, one of the things we recognize is that a proposal may come from faculty that don't necessarily teach in one of these areas, but might cover one of these areas. For example, faculty in communication studies often work with social science sort of methods, as do faculty in business. And so they might be able to put in a proposal that draws on those areas and covers those areas, even though they're not in social sciences, for example. Now, some of the courses that we've offered in these areas, we had one in 3100, 3150 that's been offered multiple times by Terry Nelson and initially Davida Fishman and now Becky Talon, called Epistemological Revolutions, that uses the Reacting to the Past curriculum in order to take students through a series of experiences that challenge them to think about the intersections of the sciences and the humanities, particularly kind of how the sciences impact society and the sort of tensions that can emerge there. And the project that they did was to students design their own Reacting to the Past game around another moment of kind of science and humanities intersections. I will highlight that 3100, 3150 seems to be the combination. Natural sciences, physical sciences, life sciences with humanities seems to be the area where we get the fewest proposals. And so I think we're particularly eager to see more proposals coming from that combination of disciplines. In 3200 and 3250, looking at sciences and social sciences, we've had a couple of classes there that were very successful. One of them brought together notions of activism and advocacy, taught by Kelly Campbell and Claudia Davis, kind of pulling together the kind of social science aspect of psychology, and Claudia Davis's work in nursing is the kind of natural science basis for that. We also had a course taught that looked at the social determinants of health and thinking about kind of health inequities. That was taught by Ethel Nickdow and Nicole Henley. That was very successful. They actually engaged students during the spring semester when it was taught in producing presentations that were offered at Meeting of the Minds as a way of sort of plugging our students into the kind of larger campus culture. And then finally, with 3300, 3350, we had a couple of classes, one called Belonging Across Borders that was taught by Deirdre Landeskog and Vanessa Ovaya Perez, that looked at notions of community in border areas. That drew on Vanessa's work in kind of English studies and Deirdre's work in social work. And that was a much loved class. And then we had a proposal, though we haven't had opportunity to offer it, from Chris Natikia and Daniel McDonald, called Worker Democracy, that was really thinking about the kind of return to kind of unionism in recent years, which is just remarkably relevant right now. And we're really looking for ways that we can kind of get that class executed. So those are some of the ways that these combinations have looked. Now, one of the big challenges to these courses, and this can be intimidating, is that because they're capstone courses, they really try to pull together a lot of those GE outcomes. Now, while we encourage faculty to really try to tackle as many of these as possible, we recognize that not all of them will be covered equally, right? And some may be very heavily demoted while others are very heavily promoted. But all of them try to tackle, kind of on the right side of that slide there, those key outcomes. And then each pairing also tries to tackle two others. In 3100, 3150, you can see technological literacy and global perspectives. That's because we've attached technological literacy to all of the natural sciences oriented pairings, and we have attached global perspectives to the humanities oriented pairings. And then 3200, 3250, technological literacy again because of the natural science connection, and diverse perspectives, which we've attached to the social science side of the pairings. And then 3300, 3350, we bring together diverse perspectives from the social science and global perspectives from the humanities. Now, the other aspect to be aware of is that all honors classes are identified as writing intensive. That does not mean that students have to do tons and tons of writing, right? For anybody that's attended any of the writing intensive workshops, you'll know that writing intensive really just indicates that some writing is done and faculty are intentional about providing some aspect of writing instruction. And the way we see it in these courses, in the junior level courses, is that different disciplines have different conventions that they bring to writing. And so this is a space where students can be shown what the conventions are of those two disciplines that are being brought together in the experience, and can be brought, faculty can kind of bring to attention the ways that they're similar, the ways that they're different, and give students opportunity to explore that. So those are the outcome goals. I want to sort of move into the sort of final section here where we think about the tips for developing a JIE proposal. And I've got 6 tips that are really kind of oriented around building collaborative partnerships. And building collaborative partnerships between faculty, but also among students. And so the first of these is to obviously find a collaborator. And the first way to do that is that if you're struggling to find somebody who has kind of research interests that connect to you, email us at honors@csusb.edu, and we'll get part of our student team to start researching faculty that have interests that you do. And what we would need from you is your name, obviously, your department, and a description of your research and teaching interests. And then we can have our team go out and sort of look for faculty that might match with you. Now, other things to do, I mean, and these are things that we suggest to students in the honors program when they're looking for faculty mentors, is review faculty web pages to see kind of what faculty are on the campus that might share areas of interest with you. Or to look at course offerings in other departments to see if there are courses that are tied to the kinds of research topics that you're interested in. And the goal, again, is to really just reach out to colleagues and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. I'm wondering if you'd like to think about it with me. And we've had tremendous success with faculty making those kinds of connections. And we've actually been able to make connections for faculty that have gone on to have very successful courses. Deirdre Landeskog and Vanessa Ovaya Perez's course is exactly a case in point. The second tip would be to share approaches. When you found somebody that is willing to have a conversation like that with you, have a conversation about what motivates your research. If you have kind of overlaps in the way you work, do you have overlap in what motivates your work? How can that motivation then be brought to bear in the design of a course, for example? Next, what questions drive your research? To what extent do you have similar questions? How do your questions diverge? And how can those similarities and differences really begin to inform the conceptualization of what a course might do? And finally, what kind of data or materials do you examine in your work? And how do you go about examining it, right? We would get very different approaches if we're looking at somebody in the arts versus somebody in the sciences. And so how can those, the same materials be explored from those perspectives? The third tip is to then explore methodologies. So I think the first step to this would be to explicate each of your methodological approaches. Again, if you're working in philosophy and physics, you're going to have very different approaches to the way you build knowledge or express ideas, right? If you're working in creative writing and psychology, again, you've got very different approaches. And I think the first recognition needs to be that each member of that partnership needs to become aware of the way the other works in order to sort of find ways that synergy can emerge. And next, maybe there's an opportunity here to think about how each methodology addresses common aspects of whatever the topic happens to be. Are there ways that the two disciplines seem to work similarly, right? And then contrary to that, what are the unique elements that the different methodologies draw into view? Again, the philosopher may be thinking about the cosmos in ways that highlight particular aspects of it that a physicist, an astronomer, really doesn't think about, and vice versa. And so what are the sort of interesting opportunities there to kind of bring in aspects of topics that one field may not have thought to bring in? Now, the fourth tip would be to formulate questions. And I think there's some questions for faculty to keep in mind as they do this, right? First, and please ignore my typo there, what do you want to focus students' attention on within the topic, right? Oftentimes our research topics can be pretty broad. And while we may have very specific angles we bring to them, we might want to think about, as we bring these different disciplines, these different ways of working together, are there particular aspects of the topic that we want students to be focused on? And so that's the first thing to start thinking about as you begin to articulate questions, because the questions we pose are going to draw attention to very particular aspects of the topic. Next, how will the questions facilitate multidisciplinary approaches to learning? The inquiry questions that you build a course around, we want them to sort of draw on both of the disciplines, both of the methodologies, both of the kinds of activities that the disciplines bring to the table. And so thinking about how the different disciplines might interact and how they can generate interdisciplinary approaches to things can be important in thinking about how you articulate a question. And then finally, and I think this is a really important one that needs to be thought about, how might the questions you pose for students, the inquiry questions, advance your research interests, right? This is an opportunity to immerse students in real sort of critical, analytical, creative thinking that grows out of the interests of the faculty involved. And so this is an opportunity to learn alongside students. I don't think we should feel like we have to have all the answers. I think we should feel like these courses are an opportunity to develop our own research interests, to develop the actual research alongside students who are learning with us. And the way we learn by approaching questions that we may not have our own answers to yet becomes a model for our students who can mimic and replicate the kinds of ways that we're working. And I think that if we consider the courses in this way, it opens up a really interesting possibility for faculty from different departments, maybe from different colleges on campus, to actually publish together and to think about producing research that is collaborative between themselves, right? And I'm not sure that we see too many other opportunities on campus to sort of use a class to develop this kind of research opportunity. Okay. The fifth tip I would suggest is to consider the kinds of materials that you might want to work with, right? So what are the different disciplinarily focused materials that can be brought into dialogue? So again, if we think about Deirdre and Vanessa's course, how might research in social sciences and social work in particular be brought to bear on literature having to do with a border experience in order to create a dialogue about the topic, right? And then what experience might students have to supplement materials? There's nothing that says that we have to stay in a classroom or even on campus with these experiences. There's opportunity to take students places. Now, on the most dramatic level, because these are 6-unit courses, when you put them together, there's an opportunity here to think about putting together a summer abroad program around these courses. That's a possibility. on a smaller scale, we've had faculty in these courses take students off campus to a variety of different sites. Sometimes just to a restaurant that has a particular kind of cultural configuration in order for students to kind of experience that. We had a class on kind of conceptualizing race that did that. Went to a Mexican restaurant that really served as the template for Taco Bell, that served a kind of unique and regionally specific taco that came in a hard shell. And so students went there, had dinner together, and thought about the way that that cultural expression was appropriated into mass culture with Taco Bell. So even that kind of excursion is possible here. And then finally, when thinking about materials, what guests might be invited to contribute to the experience? We've had guest speakers come in, and we've been able to give them a small honorarium to recognize that. We do have a fairly limited budget for this, but again, it's a possibility, and we can certainly help you think about who you might want to bring in, and we are always willing to think about how we can provide some kind of honorarium for those people. So again, materials, and thinking about materials in non-typical ways is one of the things that we would encourage you to do. And finally, the sixth tip would be to imagine a project. And I realize the proposal asks for a short description of a project, but when I say imagine here, what I'm trying to encourage is to really think out of the box, right? Really explore possibility. Really imagine something that does allow students to do something totally different, right? Again, Terry Nelson and Becky Talon have had students reacting to the past games around particular historical moments where science and kind of humanities issues collide. That's a really kind of unique project. The question is not what should students do, but what might students do? What can students do, right? How can we expose them to unique experiences to collaborate around the kinds of materials that they've encountered, the ideas, the concepts, the topics? We want students to have an opportunity to really do something different here. And related to that, the projects also are an opportunity for students to demonstrate their knowledge and ability to apply learning, right? So how can these kinds of approaches, the projects that get imagined, how do they enable students to do that, right? And in saying that, I don't necessarily mean like, well, one of the GE outcomes is metacognition. How can the project be an example of that, a demonstration of metacognition? It can do that if you want it to, but what I'm thinking is more in terms of, if you're working in psychology and in communication studies, then how can you give students an opportunity to demonstrate their grasp of a psychological concept in a space that is thinking about how you communicate about climate change? That becomes an interesting intersection of the concepts and the methodologies that the two disciplines bring together. And finally, a final question to sort of muse over is who might benefit from the work students do on their projects, right? Projects can be community engaged, and we're happy to help support faculty that want to explore the possibility of community engagement with their projects. And we'll enthusiastically reach out to Diane Podolsky, who's involved in the honors program in a couple of different ways to sort of provide support and guidance on how we might do that. Okay, so again, the project here and the questions that are being posed are really about trying to think in different ways about the kinds of things students can do collaboratively to put the knowledge they're gaining to work and to give them practice at doing that. So those are my 6 tips and the overview of the program. I'll end there, except to say, what questions do you have?
Do I ask questions?
Do you have any questions, Kate?
I have lots of questions, but I don't know that I want the questions to go on the recording.
Okay, well, let's stop the recording here.